Welcome, children, for second part of your history, chapter number 4. The name of the topic is Tribals, Dikus, and Vision of a Golden Age. Boys, in the discussion of our previous day's class, or previous part of the chapter, we have learned about these different tribal people who are residing in different parts, especially in the forest areas. And we have learned about Zoom cultivators. Some were hunters and gatherers. How do they collect forest produce and how do they survive their life? We have learned. So now let us see page number 41. Some herded animals. Boys, before starting this, have a look this map which is given in this page, figure 3. There you can see location of some tribal groups in India. So these are the areas where some of the tribal groups they are residing in different part of our country. So now let us see some herded animals. Many tribal groups lived by herding and rearing animals. Among the tribals, many tribal groups they used to live by domesticating different animals. They were pastoralists who moved with their herds of cattle or sheep according to the season. Pastoralists means a sheep or cattle farmer. As they used to rear different animals, so they are here pastoralists. They used to move with their different animals, cattle or sheep, from one place to another according to the rhythm of the seasons. When the grass in one place was exhausted, they moved to another area. As in when they find in a particular place there's lack of grasses, or it becomes very hard to get grasses for those animals. So in such situation, they used to move from that very place to another place. The Van Gujars of the Punjab hills and the Lawadis of Andhra Pradesh were cattle herders. The Gaddis of Kulu were shepherds, and the Bakarwals of Kashmir reared goats. So you see here different people of different regions. They are domesticating different animals. You will read more about them in your history book next year. Next year means in class 9, boys. You will study more about them in your history book. Let us see next page. A time to hunt, a time to sow, a time to move to a new field. Time, that means when it was hunting, and another time that means it is to sow sits and a time in order to move to a new field. Have you ever noticed that people living in different types of societies do not share the same notion of work and time? The lives of the shifting cultivators and hunters in different regions were regulated by a calendar and division of tasks for men and women. Barrier Elwin, a British anthropologist who lived among the Bigars and Khons of central India for many years in the 1930s and 1940s, gives us a picture of what this calendar and division of tasks was like. Here I see what he has written here under about that. Anthropologist means a person who study about human body. So he has mentioned this. Let us see. In Chat, Chat is the name of a month, boys. Uh, Most probably it comes in the month of February. February month, okay. Then in Chat, women went to clearings to cut stalks that were already reaped. Men cut large trees and go for their ritual hunt. So these are the activities which used to do by male and female in the month of Chait. The hunt began at full moon from the east. Traps of bamboo were used for hunting. The women gathered fruits like sago. Sago it is a type of fruit, boys. Palm trees like that. Tamarind and mushroom. Baiga women can only gather roots or kanda and mahua seeds. So Baiga, these women, they used to, they can only collect roots or kanda and mahua seeds of all the Adivasis in Central India. The Vaigas were known as the best hunters among all these Adivasis. Adivasis means those who are residing in the forest, those who are residing in the forest of central India. The Vaigas were known as the best hunters. They are the best hunter for hunting any animals. In Baishak, the firing of the forest took place. The women gathered unburnt wood to burn. Men continued to hunt, but nearer their villages. In Jet, see this all name, that means it has given the name of the month of Hindi, okay? Chait, Baishak, Jet, like that. So in the month of Baishak, Baishak means most probably March, April, like that. What activities they used to do, you can see here. In Jet, showing took place and hunting still went on. So this one, April, May month, Jet means. So during that time, what happened? Showing took place. They used to show different crops. Different, that means seeds they used to show. And hunting still went on at the time. From Ashad to Bhadon, the men worked in the fields. August, July, August, men they used to go for working in the fields. In Kuar, the first fruits of beans, soya ripened, and in Kartik Kutki became a reap. Okay, so you see, Kuar, it is also in the name of a month which comes uh, in the month of August, like that, August, September. Then, likewise, in Kuwait, the first fruits of beans were ripened. Now that crops, it become mature totally and perfect for cutting it and carrying it at home. And in Kartik, Kutki became ripe. In Aghan, every crop was ready, and in Push, winnowing took place. Push was also the time for dances and marriages. In Magh, ships were met to new viewers, and hunting gathering was the main subsistence activity. The cycle described above took place in the first year. In the second year, there was more time for hunting as only a few crops had to be sown and harvested. But since there was enough food, the man lived in the viewers. It was only in the third year that the diet had to be supplemented with the forest products. Now, let us proceed to the next page, page 43. Some took to settle cultivation. Settling means to put an end to an argument or disagreement. That is settling. But settle means where that means anyone or someone used to reside permanently. Even before the 19th century, many from within the tribal groups had begun settling down and cultivating their fields in one place year after year. But just by staying there, they began to do what? They began settling down and cultivating their fields in one place year after year. In several years, they used to grow like that. Instead of moving from one place to another, from place to place. So earlier, yes, they used to move from one place to another. So yes, that means settling life. They go. That means now no more. They need to move from one place to another. In a particular place, they can settle there and they can grow crops. They began to use the plough and gradually got rights over the land they lived on. So what happened? They started to use plough in order to make fit his field to grow crops and slowly got rights over that land where they are living. In many cases, like the Mundas of Chotanagpur, the land belonged to the clan as a whole. All members of the clan were regarded as descendants of the original settlers. Here, all members, they are what happened of the clan were regarded as descendants. Descendant means descended from a particular ancestor. Like this, that means father's father, like that, okay. Who had first cleared the land. Therefore, all of them had right on the lands. Yes, that means they cleared at first that land. So they have the right on the land. Very often, some people within the clan acquired more power then others. Some became chiefs and others followers. So very often what happens, some of the people within that their group, clan means a group of families who are related in each other. So among them what happened, to obtain more power than others, they can, that means obtain their power, more power to compare with others. Some became chiefs and others followers. Other followers means who used to follow to their chief. Then others, see here, powerful men often rented out their land instead of cultivating it themselves. Those who are powerful, they used to give their land as rented to those peasants, okay, out their land instead of cultivating it by themselves. British officials saw settled tribal groups like the Gonds and Santals as more civilized than hunter gatherers or shifting cultivators. British officials, they find what? They show that settled tribal groups there, like the Gonds and Santals, is more civilized in order to compare with the hunter gatherers or shifting cultivators. Those who lived in the forest were considered to be wild and savage. They needed to be settled and civilized. Those who used to live in the forest, they were considered as wild and savage. Now they needed to be settled and civilized. Just thinking by this British. How did colonial rule affect tribal lives? Colonial means when that means other country when it rule our a country. So this here, how did this colonial rule it affect tribal lives? The lives of tribal groups changed during British rule. Let us see what these changes were. See, the living standard of tribal people changed as in when British was ruling here. Now let us see what are the changes that took place during those days. Here it has given under. What happened to tribal chiefs? Tribal chiefs means village headman like that. Okay. So what happened to these tribal chiefs? Let's see. Before the arrival of the British, in many areas, the tribal chiefs were important people. So before arrival, that means this British to our India, in many areas, the tribal chiefs they were important people. They enjoyed a certain amount of economic power and had the right to administer and control their territories. So these chiefs they used to enjoy a certain amount of economic power and they had the authenticity to administer and control their areas or territories. In some places, they had their own police and decided on the local rules of land and forest management. Under British rule, the functions and powers of the tribal chiefs changed considerably. So, as and when British began to rule, so under them, under their ruling system, the work or the functions and powers of tribal chiefs changed in a remarkable way. They were allowed to keep their land titles over a cluster of villages and rent outlands, but they lost much of their administrative power and were forced to follow laws made by British officials in India. See the condition. Here, what happened? They lost much of their administrative powers as British existed, and they were forced by the British to follow laws which had made by these British officials in our country. They also had to pay tribute to the British and discipline uh, the tribal groups on behalf of the British. They lost the authority they had earlier enjoyed amongst their people. So they have lost this their power, you have to say, their authority which they had earlier before arrival of British, which they enjoyed amongst their people, and were unable to fulfill their traditional functions. And functions, that means which they used to organize or celebrate earlier, now no more they can function it. Yes, British existed there. What happened to the shifting cultivators? Those people whose livelihood was shifting cultivation. What happened to those? Let us see now. The British were uncomfortable with groups who moved about and did not have a fixed home. British, they found it is not comfortable for them with those group of people who used to go from one place to another and who moved about and did not have a fixed home where they could live permanently. They wanted tribal groups to settle down and become peasant cultivators. Here, they wanted these tribal groups to be settled down in a particular place and become peasant cultivators. Okay, farm cultivators like that. Settled peasants were easier to control and administer than people who were always on the move. So it was easy for the Britishers that settled peasants were easier in order to control them and administer than also who were always on move in order to compare with those people who were always on move. Settle peasants were easier. Administer means to manage something, to manage those people here, most probably. The British also wanted a regular revenue source for the state. So they introduced land settlements, that is, they measured the land, defined the rights of each individual to that land, and fixed the revenue demand for the state. So the British here they want what? A regular revenue source, tax sources. It is for the state. So they here introduced land settlements, that is, they measured the land and defined the rights of each individual to that land. And moreover, these British people they fixed the revenue demand for the state. Some peasants were declared landowners, others tenants. So in such conditions, some peasants they got must land and become the landowners. Others, they become tenants. Tenants means a person who pays money on rent, okay, to the owner of room, flat, or land, etc. As you have seen, chapter number 2, the tenants were to pay rent to the landowner, who in turn paid revenue to the state. So you have got through in chapter number 2 regarding these tenants. The British effort to settle Jum cultivators was not very successful. Settle plough cultivation is not easy in areas where water is scarce and the soil is dry. So British effort in order to settle Jum cultivators, it was not very successful. Settle plough cultivation is not easy in those areas where water is available in less quantity and the soil is dry. In fact, Jum cultivators who took to plough cultivation often suffered since their fields did not produce good yields. So, as there is lack of water and lack of soil fertility, and by the way, as soil, that means it becomes dry. So, what happened here? In fact, Jum cultivators, they took to plough cultivation often suffered. They were suffered of growing crops. It is because of their fields did not produce good yields. This is because of that water scarcity and dry of soil. So the Jum cultivators in northeast India, instead on continuing with their traditional practice, facing widespread protests, the British had to ultimately allow them the right to carry on shifting cultivation in some parts of the forest. Then, in such a condition, what happened? British were bound to allow them the right to carry on shifting cultivation in some parts of the forest. See here, tribal workers in a rice field in Andhra Pradesh, they're working there. Forest laws and their impact. The life of tribal groups, as you have seen, was directly connected to the forest. Here in this chapter, we have learned, boys, life of tribal groups. They are directly connected with the forest. So, changes in forest laws had a considerable effect on tribal lives. So, in this way, changes in forest laws had a considerable effect to those tribal lives. The British extended their control over all forests and declared that forests were state property. Some forests were classified as reserve forests for they produce timber which the British wanted. The British have extended their control over all the forests and they declared that forests were the property of state. And by the way, some forests they classified as protected forest for they produce timber which the British wanted. they make this reserve forest. It is because of from there they can produce timber, which was liked by the British. In this forest, people were not allowed to move freely, practice zoom cultivation, collect fruits, or hunt animals. So, in reserve forest, was such thing is not possible. It is not allowed. Zooming cultivation cannot be done there. One cannot move freely there. Then nobody is allowed to go for hunting inside that forest or collect fruits from there. How were Zoom cultivators to survive in such a situation? Many were therefore forced to move to other areas in search of work and livelihood. Then, as that means they depend, these tribal groups, they depend on forest. And by the way, we find here the British, they made laws, they made a reserve forest. Then, how were these Zoom cultivators to survive in such a condition? As a result of this, many of them forced to move to other places, areas. They were forced to go to other areas. It is because of searching of work and their livelihood. But once the British stopped the tribal people from living inside forests, they faced a problem. But as and when British they stopped these tribal people from living inside forests, these tribal people they faced a problem. From where would the forest department get its labor to cut trees for railway sleepers and to transport logs? So this problem also faced by these British. Colonial officials came up with a solution. Colonial means here connected with or belonging to a country that controls another country. So these colonial officials came up with a solution there. They decided that they would give Jum cultivators small patches of land in the forest and allow them to cultivate this on the condition that those who lived in the villages would have to provide labor to the forest department and look after the forest. So, in such a term and condition, these colonial officials they came with that solution. They thought what that or they decided that they would give Jum cultivators small area of land, small patches of land means a small area of land in those forests, and they will allow them to cultivate that small patches of land. And it was on the condition they kept one term and condition is there. What was that condition? That those who lived in the villages would have to provide labor to the forest department and look after the forest. They have to work in the forest department for them and they have to look after the forest. So, in many regions, the forest department established forest villages to ensure a regular supply of cheap labor. So, in this way, what happened? In many areas, the forest department they established forest villages in order to ensure a regular supply of cheap labor. Sleepers, see boys here. The horizontal planks of wood on which railway lines are laid. Then here under in this land of the English, how hard It is tulip. You just read it. Many tribal groups reacted against the colonial forest laws. So that laws which was launched by British. So many tribal groups they were reacted against that colonial forest laws. They disobeyed the new rules which made by this British, continued with practices that were declared illegal and at times rose in open rebellion. So what happened? They disobeyed that. Means these tribal people they were not happy with that terms and conditions which were made by this British. So they continued with practice that were declared illegal, which was that means declared by this British as illegal, and at times rose in open rebellion. So in this way, see here an occasion when some of the people in a country tried to change the government using violence. So they came against of these rules which made by these British. Such was the revolt of Sangram Sangma in 1906 in Assam and the forest satyagraha of the 1930s in the central provinces. Satyagraha means holding on to truth. It was at first launched by Gandhiji. So such thing was took place the year which is given here in the central provinces. So that's up to here for today. Thank you all.